the Silk Road, connecting East and West. Hello and welcome. Today, I'm going to whisper to you about one of the most fascinating and historically significant trade routes in the world, the Silk Road. This ancient network of trade routes stretched across Asia, connecting the East with the West, and it wasn't just about silk. Over centuries, the Silk Road became the lifeline for cultural, religious, and technological exchanges, transforming civilizations along its path. The Silk Road wasn't a single road, but rather a vast network of routes that linked the great empires of the ancient world, from China, across Central Asia, and into the Mediterranean. Its origins can be traced back to the 2nd century BCE during the Han Dynasty of China, when traders began exchanging goods like silk, spices, and precious metals. However, it soon became much more than just a trade route for goods. It carried ideas, art, religions, and even disease, shaping the world in ways that can still be felt today. Over the centuries, the Silk Road saw empires rise and fall, from the mighty Han Dynasty to the Romans, Persians, and Mongols. With every era, new influences flowed along the route, whether it was Buddhism traveling eastward to China, or Roman glassware finding its way into the palaces of the East. The Silk Road was more than just a physical path, it was a bridge between cultures, creating a shared history that continues to fascinate us today. In this journey, we'll explore the origins, the golden eras, the transformations brought by new religions, and finally, the eventual decline of this legendary route. But don't worry, its legacy lives on, and we'll see how the spirit of the Silk Road continues to influence our world. So, get comfortable, relax, and let me guide you through the intricate history of the Silk Road, where East meets West in a timeless exchange of culture, commerce, and connection. The origins of the Silk Road, 2nd century BCE. As we begin our exploration of the Silk Road, we travel back to its origins in the 2nd century BCE, during the reign of China's Han Dynasty. The Silk Road, while it became a famous network of trade routes, didn't just emerge overnight. It was the product of ambition, necessity, and curiosity, the desire to connect distant civilizations for trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. The story begins with the Chinese Empire's pursuit of alliances and goods from faraway lands, an ambition that would forever change the ancient world. At the heart of the Silk Road's creation was China's strategic need to protect its empire. During the reign of Emperor Wu, 141 to 87 BCE, China faced constant pressure from the nomadic tribes of the Xiongnu, fierce warriors who frequently raided China's northern borders. In order to secure peace and possibly gain allies, Emperor Wu decided to send an envoy westward to explore potential partnerships with other powerful kingdoms. This decision was the first step in opening up China to the world beyond its borders and setting the foundations of the Silk Road. In 138 BCE, Emperor Wu dispatched a young diplomat named Shang Qian on a mission that would take him deep into unknown territories. Shang Qian's objective was simple but daring: travel west, make contact with tribes and kingdoms that might be willing to form alliances against the Xiongnu, and return with information that could help China navigate its regional challenges. His journey was fraught with danger. Captured by the Xiongnu early on, Shang Qian spent more than 10 years as a prisoner, but eventually managed to escape and resume his mission. What Shang Qian discovered on his journey would change the course of Chinese history. Traveling through the harsh deserts and high mountains of Central Asia, he came into contact with various kingdoms that were previously unknown to the Chinese court. In places like Fergana, Bactria, and Parthia, Shang Qian saw powerful civilizations with rich cultures and thriving economies. One of the most significant discoveries Shang made was the demand for Chinese silk in these far-flung regions. Silk, which had been produced in China for centuries, was a highly valued luxury item in the West. The rulers and aristocrats of these lands prized silk as a symbol of wealth and status. Silk production was a closely guarded secret in China, and its method was unknown to the rest of the world. This made Chinese silk even more desirable, and Zhang Qian realized that opening trade routes to these western kingdoms could bring immense wealth and prestige to the Han Empire. But silk wasn't the only commodity of interest. Zhang Qian also encountered heavenly horses in Fergana, strong, fast horses that Emperor Wu coveted for his cavalry. These horses would not only serve China's military needs but also symbolized the kind of valuable exchanges that could happen if China opened its borders to trade. Upon his return to China, Zhang Qian's reports of these distant lands astonished Emperor Wu and his court. He spoke of wealthy civilizations eager for trade and alliances, and his findings laid the groundwork for what would become the Silk Road. What had begun as a diplomatic mission to secure allies had now turned into an opportunity to create a vast trade network that would connect the East to the West. But the birth of the Silk Road wasn't just about economic ambition. It was also about diplomatic ties and cultural exchanges. As China began to engage with Central Asian kingdoms, the Silk Road became a conduit not only for silk, spices, and precious metals but also for ideas, religion, and culture. The Silk Road, in its early days, was a patchwork of routes that connected various trade hubs across the harsh landscapes of Central Asia. Merchants, caravans, and traders traversed the treacherous deserts such as the Taklamakan and the high mountain passes of the Pamir Mountains, risking their lives in the pursuit of profit and connection. The harshness of the terrain made trade along the Silk Road both risky and rewarding. Travelers faced extreme weather conditions, bandits, and long stretches of barren desert. However, the promise of valuable goods such as silk, jade, and lacquerware from China, and gold, ivory, and horses from the West kept merchants coming back. The economic benefits of the Silk Road were clear. It created wealth, established powerful trade hubs, and opened up markets in both the East and the West. In its early years, the Silk Road wasn't just a single path but a series of interconnected routes that stretched from China's capital, Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, through the Tarim Basin and into the heart of Central Asia, eventually reaching as far as the Mediterranean. Along these routes, not only goods but also knowledge, culture, and technology flowed freely. The Silk Road's emergence also meant the spread of new ideas. Buddhism, for example, would soon travel along these routes into China, where it would become one of the most influential religions in East Asia. By the end of the 2nd century BCE, the Silk Road was firmly established as a vital artery for trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. What began as a mission to protect China's borders had blossomed into a dynamic and thriving network that connected the East with the West. The Silk Road would continue to grow and evolve in the centuries to come, but its origins in the Han Dynasty laid the foundation for a world-changing network that would endure for over 1,000 years. The establishment of the Silk Road was not just about trade, it was about creating connections, building relationships, and bringing distant civilizations into contact. This would have a lasting impact on the world, as the Silk Road became a symbol of human ambition and the enduring desire to explore and understand the unknown. The early routes, connecting China to Central Asia. As the Silk Road began to take shape in the 2nd century BCE, it wasn't one single, unified road, but rather a network of routes that expanded over time. The early routes were vital arteries that connected China to Central Asia, opening up trade and communication between the East and the West. In these early stages, the Silk Road was shaped by the natural geography of the region, the ambitions of empires, and the perseverance of merchants willing to brave the treacherous paths through deserts and mountains. The primary starting point of the Silk Road was Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, the capital of the Han Dynasty. From there, caravans embarked on long and perilous journeys through the Gansu Corridor, a narrow strip of land bordered by mountains and desert that served as the gateway to the west. This corridor was crucial for trade as it provided a relatively safe passage through the otherwise harsh terrain of northern China. However, beyond this relatively secure region, the challenges multiplied. One of the first major obstacles traders encountered was the Taklamakan Desert, one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Known as the Desert of Death, the Taklamakan was a vast sea of sand with extreme temperatures and almost no water sources. Traders had to choose their routes carefully, often traveling around the desert rather than through it. The northern route skirted the desert's edge, passing through a series of oases such as Turpan, Khotan, and Kashgar, which served as vital rest stops for weary travelers. These oasis towns became thriving hubs of commerce, where merchants could rest, trade goods, and replenish supplies before continuing their journeys. The oasis towns were more than just places of trade, they were cultural melting pots. Merchants from China, Persia, India, and beyond passed through these towns, bringing with them not only goods but also ideas, religions, and technologies. As a result, these early Silk Road routes were as much about cultural exchange as they were about economic trade. In the oasis markets, traders exchanged Chinese silk, jade, and lacquerware for Persian silver, Roman glassware, and Indian spices. These interactions laid the groundwork for the cultural syncretism that would define the Silk Road for centuries to come. Beyond the Taklamakan, the Silk Road continued westward, through the high mountain passes of the Tian Shan and Pamir Mountains. These rugged mountains posed yet another formidable challenge for traders. The steep and dangerous passes were often blocked by snow, and travelers had to be well prepared to navigate these treacherous routes. But despite the risks, the rewards of trade made the journey worthwhile. Merchants carried silk, spices, tea, and precious stones from the east, while from the west came glass, gold, silver, and exotic animals. The early Silk Road routes also passed through important cultural and economic centers in Central Asia, such as the Kingdom of Fergana in modern-day Uzbekistan and Sogdia in modern-day Tajikistan. These regions played a crucial role in facilitating trade between China and the West. The Fergana Valley was particularly important for its famous heavenly horses, which were highly prized by the Chinese for their strength and endurance. The acquisition of these horses became a symbol of power and prestige for the Han emperors, and the trade in these horses strengthened ties between China and Central Asia. The Sogdians were another key group that facilitated trade along the Silk Road. Skilled merchants and diplomats, the Sogdians established trading colonies along the entire length of the Silk Road, from China to the Mediterranean. Their language became the lingua franca of the Silk Road, allowing merchants from different regions to communicate and trade more easily. The Sogdians were not only traders but also carriers of culture, spreading Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and later Islam along the trade routes. Their influence on the development of the Silk Road was profound, and their contributions helped shape the cultural and religious exchanges that flourished along the route. By the 1st century BCE, the Silk Road had become a well-established network of routes connecting China to Central Asia and beyond. These early routes were more than just commercial highways, they were conduits for cultural exchange, diplomacy, and the spread of new technologies. Paper, for example, was first developed in China and spread to the West along the Silk Road, revolutionizing communication and record-keeping in the ancient world. Likewise, technologies such as the stirrup, which originated in Central Asia, traveled eastward and had a profound impact on Chinese military tactics. The early Silk Road routes also facilitated the spread of religions. Buddhism, which originated in India, began to travel eastward along the Silk Road during this period, reaching China and eventually becoming one of the dominant religions in East Asia. Buddhist monks and missionaries traveled alongside merchants, carrying scriptures, religious art, and new philosophies into the heart of China. Along the way, Buddhism adapted to local cultures and influenced the development of art, architecture, and spiritual practices across Central Asia and China. The early Silk Road routes, though dangerous and difficult, were vital for the growth of trade and cultural exchange between the East and West. By connecting China to Central Asia and the Mediterranean, the Silk Road laid the foundation for centuries of interaction between distant civilizations. It was through these early routes that the Silk Road began to take shape as not just a trade route, but a network of human connection that would endure for over a millennium. The height of the Silk Road during the Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty, 206 BCE, 220 CE, marked the golden age of the Silk Road, as trade flourished between the East and West like never before. The routes that had been slowly developing during the early years of the Silk Road were now fully established, and merchants, diplomats, and scholars traveled these paths in growing numbers. Under the strong and stable rule of the Han emperors, the Silk Road reached its peak, becoming the central artery for the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures across vast distances. The success of the Silk Road during the Han Dynasty was largely due to the Chinese Empire's wealth and stability during this period. The Han emperors, particularly Emperor Wu, expanded the empire's borders, securing control over the Gansu corridor and extending Chinese influence into Central Asia. This strategic expansion allowed the Han Dynasty to protect key sections of the Silk Road, ensuring safe passage for traders and diplomats. As Chinese control over the Silk Road solidified, a vast network of trade routes developed, stretching from the Chinese capital of Chang'an all the way to the Mediterranean. At the heart of this trade network was silk, the luxurious and highly prized fabric that gave the Silk Road its name. Silk production was a closely guarded secret in China, and its fine, shimmering quality made it a highly sought-after commodity in the West. As word of Chinese silk spread through Central Asia, Persia, and Rome, demand for this precious fabric skyrocketed. Silk became a status symbol among the elites of Rome, Parthia, and other major empires, driving the flow of silk from China to the West. But silk wasn't the only good moving along the Silk Road. The Silk Road during the Han Dynasty facilitated the exchange of a wide variety of goods. Chinese merchants traded jade, porcelain, tea, and spices, while merchants from the West brought gold, silver, glassware, and luxury textiles. From India, spices like pepper, cardamom, and cinnamon were transported to China and the Mediterranean. In return, Chinese tea and silk were sent westward to satisfy the growing demand in the Persian and Roman empires. But beyond the flow of material goods, the Silk Road during the Han Dynasty became a conduit for cultural exchange. One of the most profound influences was the spread of Buddhism along the Silk Road. As merchants and travelers passed through India, they encountered Buddhist monks who shared their teachings. These teachings resonated with many travelers, who carried Buddhist scriptures and relics with them on their journeys. Buddhist missionaries, too, traveled along the Silk Road, spreading their faith into Central Asia and eventually into China, where Buddhism would take root and grow into one of the dominant religions of East Asia. The cultural exchanges along the Silk Road during the Han Dynasty weren't limited to religion. The Silk Road became a melting pot of ideas, technologies, and artistic traditions. For example, Chinese innovations such as papermaking and gunpowder began to spread westward, eventually reaching the Middle East and Europe. Meanwhile, the West introduced technologies like glass blowing, which revolutionized Chinese craftsmanship. This exchange of knowledge and techniques helped to shape the artistic and intellectual developments of civilizations on both sides of the Silk Road. The Han dynasty's embrace of the Silk Road also extended to diplomacy. The Han emperors maintained close relationships with the kingdoms of Central Asia, Persia, and even the Roman Empire. Chinese diplomats were dispatched to these distant lands, while foreign envoys regularly visited the Han court. These diplomatic exchanges not only helped to maintain peace along the Silk Road but also facilitated the flow of information and culture between distant civilizations. The Chinese court was particularly interested in the Roman Empire, which they referred to as Daqin, and there are records of Roman embassies reaching China during this period. The Silk Road also played a significant role in shaping the economies of the regions it connected. In Central Asia, cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, and Khotan became bustling trade hubs, where merchants from all over the world converged to exchange goods. These cities flourished as a result of the Silk Road, growing wealthy from the trade that passed through their gates. The Silk Road helped to transform Central Asia into a vibrant region of economic and cultural exchange, where different peoples and traditions coexisted and interacted. Despite the prosperity brought by the Silk Road, the trade routes were not without their challenges. The long and arduous journey across deserts and mountains remained dangerous, with traders facing threats from bandits, harsh weather, and treacherous terrain. Caravans often traveled in groups for protection, and trading posts and fortresses were established along the routes to provide shelter and security for travelers. The Han dynasty also stationed military outposts along the Silk Road to protect traders and ensure the safety of the trade routes. As trade flourished, so too did the demand for luxury goods. The wealth generated by the Silk Road enriched the Chinese Empire, helping to finance public works, military campaigns, and the construction of monumental projects such as the Great Wall of China, which was extended to protect the empire from northern invaders. The economic prosperity brought by the Silk Road contributed to the overall stability and power of the Han dynasty, making it one of the most successful and long-lasting dynasties in Chinese history. By the end of the 1st century BCE, the Silk Road had reached its zenith, becoming a thriving network of trade and cultural exchange that connected the East with the West. Under the Han dynasty, the Silk Road had evolved from a series of fragmented routes into a well-established trade network that spanned continents. This period marked the height of the Silk Road's influence, as it facilitated the flow of goods, ideas, and cultures across vast distances, shaping the development of civilizations from China to Rome. The Silk Road during the Han dynasty was more than just a commercial highway. It was a symbol of human ambition, a testament to the desire for connection, exploration, and exchange. Cultural exchange along the Silk Road. The Silk Road was not only a network of trade routes for exchanging goods, it became one of the most important conduits for cultural exchange in human history. This ancient path connected civilizations across China, India, Persia, the Middle East, and Europe, facilitating not just the movement of silk, spices, and precious stones, but also the flow of ideas, art, religion, and technology. As merchants, travelers, scholars, and diplomats made their way along the Silk Road, they carried with them the knowledge and traditions of their cultures, enriching the societies they encountered. One of the most significant cultural exchanges that took place along the Silk Road was the spread of Buddhism. Originating in India in the 6th century BCE, Buddhism gradually made its way northward into Central Asia and China during the first few centuries CE. Buddhist monks traveled alongside merchants, carrying religious texts, statues, and relics. As they moved through the oasis towns and cities of Central Asia, such as Khotan, Kashgar, and Samarkand, Buddhism took root in these areas, influencing local culture, art, and architecture. In places like Gandhara, a region in what is now Pakistan and Afghanistan, a unique form of Buddhist art emerged, combining Greek, Indian, and Persian elements. This fusion of styles was a direct result of the cross-cultural interactions facilitated by the Silk Road. Gandharan art, with its statues of the Buddha depicted in flowing Hellenistic robes and Greco-Roman features, spread eastward along the Silk Road and influenced Buddhist art in China. As Buddhism continued its journey eastward, it adapted to the local cultures it encountered, blending with Confucian and Taoist thought in China, and later spreading to Korea and Japan. Buddhism wasn't the only religion that spread along the Silk Road. Zoroastrianism, the ancient religion of Persia, also traveled eastward, as did Manichaeism, a faith that blended elements of Christianity, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism. These religions reached China and other parts of East Asia, where they were practiced alongside local beliefs. The Silk Road became a religious highway, carrying not just goods but spiritual ideas that would transform the belief systems of the regions it connected. Nestorian Christianity, a branch of Eastern Christianity, also traveled along the Silk Road, reaching as far as Tang Dynasty China, where Nestorian Christian communities were established in major cities like Chang'an. The cities along the Silk Road, such as Samarkand, Bokhara, Merv, and Chang'an, became vibrant centers of cultural interaction. These cities, located at key points along the route, acted as hubs where traders from across Asia and the Mediterranean exchanged goods, ideas, and customs. Sogdian merchants, who dominated trade in Central Asia, played a crucial role in facilitating this cultural exchange. Fluent in many languages and skilled in diplomacy, the Sogdians acted as cultural mediators, helping to spread not only goods but also ideas between East and West. The Silk Road was also a major conduit for the exchange of artistic traditions. As Chinese silk, lacquerware, and porcelain made their way westward, Western goods such as Roman glassware, Persian textiles, and Indian ivory found their way into Chinese markets. This exchange of luxury goods led to a blending of artistic styles. Chinese artisans, inspired by the materials and techniques from the West, began incorporating Persian and Roman influences into their works, creating hybrid forms of art that were both innovative and unique. One of the most transformative innovations to travel along the Silk Road was paper. Invented in China during the Han Dynasty, paper revolutionized the way people recorded and transmitted information. The technology for making paper spread westward along the Silk Road, reaching Central Asia and eventually the Middle East and Europe. The introduction of paper had a profound impact on the development of literature, science, and education, allowing for the more widespread dissemination of knowledge. The use of paper also influenced the development of the Islamic Golden Age, as scholars in the Abbasid Caliphate adopted paper for writing texts on mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The exchange of scientific knowledge along the Silk Road was equally important. Chinese medical knowledge, including the use of herbal remedies and acupuncture, traveled westward, influencing medical practices in Persia and the Middle East. In return, Greek and Indian advancements in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine made their way to China. The exchange of scientific and medical knowledge helped to advance understanding in both the East and West, leading to innovations in fields such as anatomy, pharmacology, and surgery. In addition to science, military technology was also exchanged along the Silk Road. The invention of the stirrup in Central Asia allowed riders to better control their horses in battle, transforming cavalry warfare. This innovation spread to both China and Europe, where it revolutionized military tactics and contributed to the rise of powerful cavalry forces. The influence of the Silk Road extended to culinary traditions as well. The movement of spices, herbs, and exotic ingredients along the trade routes transformed the cuisines of the regions it connected. Indian spices such as pepper, cardamom, and cloves made their way into Chinese, Persian, and Mediterranean cooking, while Chinese tea became a highly prized commodity in the West. The cross-cultural exchange of ingredients and cooking techniques led to the development of new dishes and flavors, enriching the culinary traditions of the ancient world. By the time of the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, the Silk Road had reached its height as a conduit for cultural exchange. The Tang capital of Chang'an was one of the largest and most cosmopolitan cities in the world, attracting scholars, artists, diplomats, and traders from across Asia and beyond. The Tang emperors actively promoted trade and cultural interaction, fostering an atmosphere of openness and curiosity. The exchange of goods and ideas during this period enriched both China and the regions connected by the Silk Road, leaving a lasting legacy that would continue to shape the world for centuries. The role of the Roman Empire and the Parthians. As the Silk Road expanded westward, it connected the great civilizations of the East with those of the West, including the Roman Empire and the Parthian Empire. These two powerful empires played key roles in the development and success of the Silk Road, facilitating the exchange of goods, culture, and ideas across vast distances. Their demand for luxury goods, particularly Chinese silk, helped drive the flourishing of trade along the Silk Road, even though direct contact between Rome and China was rare. By the 1st century BCE, the Roman Empire had become a major player in Silk Road trade. The Roman aristocracy had developed a taste for Chinese silk, which quickly became a symbol of wealth and luxury. Silk was used to make elegant clothing and decorate homes, and its delicate, shimmering quality made it highly sought after. Roman elites were willing to spend enormous sums of money on silk, despite complaints from some Roman senators that the demand for silk was causing a drain on the empire's wealth. Despite these concerns, the demand for silk continued to grow, driving trade along the Silk Road. However, direct trade between Rome and China was rare due to the vast distances and hostile territories that separated them. Instead, much of the trade was conducted through intermediaries, particularly the Parthians. The Parthian Empire, located in modern-day Iran, controlled a key section of the Silk Road and acted as a crucial middleman between East and West. The Parthians were highly skilled traders and diplomats who ensured that silk and other luxury goods made their way from China and Central Asia to the Mediterranean. In return, goods from the Roman Empire, such as glassware, gold, silver, and wine, traveled eastward along the Silk Road. Roman glassware, in particular, was highly prized in China and Persia, as Roman artisans had perfected the art of glassblowing. This exchange of luxury goods helped foster strong trade relationships between the Roman Empire and the kingdoms of Central Asia, facilitated by the Parthians. The Parthians played a vital role not only as intermediaries but also as protectors of the trade routes. They established a network of trade cities and caravanserais along the Silk Road, providing merchants with safe places to rest and trade. Cities like Ctesiphon, the Parthian capital, became major centers of commerce, where goods from all over the world were exchanged. These trade hubs became vibrant cultural crossroads, where people from different regions and backgrounds met, exchanged goods, and shared ideas. The relationship between the Roman Empire and the Parthians was complex, marked by both cooperation and conflict. The two empires frequently clashed over territory and influence, particularly in Mesopotamia, but both recognized the economic benefits of Silk Road trade. Despite their political and military rivalries, they maintained open trade routes, allowing goods to flow between East and West. This pragmatic approach ensured that both empires profited from the wealth generated by the Silk Road. While direct contact between Rome and China was rare, there were a few recorded instances of Roman envoys reaching China. One of the most notable examples occurred in 166 CE, when an embassy from Emperor Marcus Aurelius reportedly arrived in China during the reign of Emperor Huan of the Han Dynasty. However, these contacts were sporadic, and most of the trade between the two empires continued to be conducted through intermediaries, particularly the Parthians and the Sogdians. The Parthian Empire played a crucial role in the cultural exchange that took place along the Silk Road. As a bridge between the East and West, Parthia became a melting pot of cultures, where influences from China, India, Persia, and Rome converged. The Parthians absorbed elements from these different cultures, which influenced their art, religion, and architecture. Parthian cities became centers of learning and artistic production, where artisans and scholars from different regions came together, creating a unique blend of styles that reflected the diversity of the Silk Road. By the 3rd century CE, the Parthian Empire was replaced by the Sasanian Empire, which continued to play a similar role in Silk Road trade. The Sasanians inherited the Parthian trade networks and further expanded their influence along the western sections of the Silk Road. Like their Parthian predecessors, the Sasanians understood the value of controlling the Silk Road and ensuring the safe passage of goods between East and West. The Roman fascination with silk persisted throughout the centuries. Roman elites continued to covet the luxurious fabric, and the demand for silk remained strong even as political changes reshaped the empires of the West and the East. The flow of silk, along with other luxury goods like spices, pearls, and ivory, helped sustain the Silk Road as a vital trade network connecting distant civilizations. In conclusion, both the Roman and Parthian empires were essential to the success of the Silk Road. The Roman demand for luxury goods, particularly Chinese silk, fueled trade along the route, while the Parthians acted as skilled middlemen, ensuring the flow of goods between East and West. Despite their political rivalries, both empires recognized the economic benefits of Silk Road trade and worked to maintain the routes that connected their civilizations. The cultural and economic exchanges that took place along the Silk Road during this period left a lasting legacy, shaping the development of both the Roman and Parthian empires, as well as the broader ancient world. The Tang Dynasty, a golden age of Silk Road trade, 7th to 9th century. The Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, is often considered one of the greatest and most prosperous periods in Chinese history, and it was during this era that the Silk Road reached its golden age. Under the Tang rulers, China became a powerful empire, renowned for its economic prosperity, military strength, and openness to cultural exchanges. This period saw the Silk Road flourish like never before, as the Tang dynasty's embrace of international trade and diplomacy created an atmosphere of peace and cooperation along the trade routes. Goods, ideas, and cultures flowed freely along the Silk Road, connecting China with the Middle East, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean. The Tang emperors actively promoted the Silk Road as a vital artery for trade, and their support of foreign trade helped China become one of the most cosmopolitan and culturally diverse empires in the world at the time. The capital city, Chang'an, modern-day Xi'an, was the largest and most cosmopolitan city of its era, home to traders, diplomats, and scholars from across Asia and beyond. Chang'an served as the eastern terminus of the Silk Road, and its bustling marketplaces were filled with merchants trading silk, spices, precious stones, glassware, and textiles. During the Tang Dynasty, the Chinese economy thrived, thanks in large part to the wealth generated by the Silk Road. Silk, the fabric that gave the trade route its name, remained one of the most valuable and sought-after commodities in the world. Chinese silk was exported in large quantities, particularly to Persia, the Byzantine Empire, and India. In return, China imported luxury goods such as pearls, spices, jewels, fine woolen textiles, and exotic animals from the West. The exchange of these goods not only enriched the Tang economy but also helped to build diplomatic and cultural ties between China and the kingdoms along the Silk Road. But the Silk Road during the Tang dynasty was more than just a commercial network. It was a conduit for cultural and intellectual exchange as new ideas, technologies, and religious beliefs flowed into China. Buddhism, which had first entered China centuries earlier, reached its peak influence during the Tang era, thanks in large part to the Silk Road. Buddhist monks from India, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia traveled to China, bringing with them religious texts, art, and practices. The Tang emperors were generally tolerant of foreign religions, and Buddhism became deeply intertwined with Chinese culture, influencing everything from art and architecture to philosophy and daily life. Chang'an, as a cosmopolitan hub, also welcomed travelers and scholars from the Islamic world, Persia, and Byzantium. Muslim traders from the Abbasid Caliphate established a presence in China, bringing new goods, medical knowledge, and technological innovations. Persian and Arab merchants brought luxury items such as perfumes, dyes, cotton textiles, and medicines. They also introduced new agricultural techniques, which had a significant impact on Chinese farming. Cultural exchange worked both ways, as Chinese inventions such as papermaking and gunpowder traveled westward, influencing technological developments in the Middle East and Europe. The Tang dynasty was also known for its openness to the world. Foreigners were welcomed in Chinese cities, and their presence added to the rich cultural tapestry of Tang society. In Chang'an, foreign traders and diplomats lived alongside Chinese officials, scholars, and artisans, creating a vibrant multicultural environment. Persian, Turkic, Sogdian, and Indian influences could be seen in the art, music, clothing, and cuisine of the Tang capital. One of the most important legacies of the Silk Road during the Tang dynasty was the exchange of scientific knowledge. Chinese scholars and scientists exchanged ideas with their counterparts from the Islamic world, Persia, and India, leading to advancements in astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and engineering. The introduction of Arabian astronomy and Persian medical texts influenced Chinese science, while Chinese inventions such as the mechanical clock and magnetic compass were shared with the West. In addition to its role in facilitating trade and cultural exchange, the Silk Road under the Tang dynasty also played a key role in the spread of new technologies. One of the most significant technological innovations to travel along the Silk Road was papermaking, which was invented in China during the Han Dynasty and refined during the Tang period. The knowledge of how to make paper traveled westward along the Silk Road, reaching Central Asia, the Middle East, and eventually Europe. Paper revolutionized communication and record-keeping, making it easier for scholars, governments, and merchants to share information and maintain detailed records. Another important technological innovation that spread during the Tang dynasty was the printing press. Although still in its early stages of development, block printing allowed for the mass production of texts, making books more accessible and helping to spread knowledge throughout China and beyond. The introduction of printing, combined with the already widespread use of paper, led to a boom in literacy and the exchange of ideas. The Tang dynasty was also a time of artistic and cultural flourishing, much of which was influenced by the cultural exchanges along the Silk Road. Tang-era art was known for its vibrant colors, intricate patterns, and diverse influences. Persian and Central Asian motifs were incorporated into Chinese ceramics, textiles, and painting. Tang sculpture and pottery often depicted foreign traders and travelers, reflecting the diversity of people who passed through the empire. The Tang court also embraced foreign music, particularly from Persia and India, which became popular in Chinese society. By the late 8th and early 9th centuries, the Tang dynasty began to face internal strife, including peasant uprisings and military challenges. The Lushan Rebellion, 755 to 763 CE, a devastating civil war, weakened the Tang government and disrupted trade along the Silk Road. Although trade continued, the golden age of the Silk Road began to wane as political instability made it more difficult for merchants to travel safely. The spread of Islam and the transformation of the Silk Road, 8th to 11th century. The rise of Islam in the 7th century and its rapid expansion across the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia had a profound impact on the Silk Road and the cultures it connected. As the Islamic caliphates grew in power, they became key players in Silk Road trade, transforming the routes and influencing the flow of goods, ideas, and technologies. From the 8th to the 11th century, the spread of Islam created a new era of cultural and economic exchange along the Silk Road, further integrating the diverse civilizations of East and West. One of the most important factors in the transformation of the Silk Road during this period was the rise of the Abbasid Caliphate, 750 to 1258 CE. Under the Abbasids, the Islamic world experienced a golden age of science, culture, and trade. The Abbasids established their capital in Baghdad, which quickly became a center of learning, commerce, and diplomacy. Baghdad was strategically located at the crossroads of trade routes that connected the Mediterranean, India, China, and Central Asia, making it one of the most important cities along the Silk Road. The Islamic world became deeply involved in Silk Road trade, as Muslim merchants played a key role in facilitating the exchange of goods between the East and West. Silk, spices, jewels, and porcelain from China and India flowed westward, while glassware, textiles, metals, and books from the Islamic world in Europe traveled eastward. Muslim traders established caravanserais, roadside inns, and markets along the Silk Road, ensuring that merchants from all regions could trade safely and profitably. The Abbasid Caliphate's emphasis on knowledge and learning also had a significant impact on the Silk Road. Baghdad became home to the famous House of Wisdom, a center for scholarly research where scientists, mathematicians, and scholars from various cultures gathered to exchange ideas. The translation of Greek, Indian, and Persian texts into Arabic helped preserve and disseminate knowledge from earlier civilizations. This intellectual exchange, facilitated by the Silk Road, led to advancements in astronomy, medicine, mathematics, philosophy, and engineering, which would later influence both the Islamic world and Europe. Islam's spread also had a profound effect on the cultures along the Silk Road. As Muslim traders, scholars, and missionaries traveled across Central Asia, Persia, and India, they brought with them not only goods but also the teachings of Islam. Many regions along the Silk Road gradually adopted Islam as their dominant religion, leading to the growth of Islamic cultural centers in cities like Samarkand, Bokhara, and Merv. These cities became hubs of Islamic art, science, and literature, blending local traditions with Islamic influences to create a unique cultural synthesis. One of the most significant changes brought about by the spread of Islam was the introduction of Arabic as a common language of trade and scholarship across much of the Silk Road. Although local languages continued to be spoken, Arabic became the lingua franca of merchants and scholars from different regions, facilitating communication and exchange across vast distances. This shared language helped unite the diverse cultures along the Silk Road and promoted the flow of ideas and information. Islamic architecture also left a lasting mark on the cities and towns along the Silk Road. Mosques, madrasas, religious schools, and caravanserais were built along the trade routes, showcasing the architectural styles of the Islamic world. Many of these structures, such as the Bibi Khanum Mosque in Samarkand and the Great Mosque of Zian, reflect a blend of Islamic, Persian, and local architectural traditions, symbolizing the cultural fusion that characterized the Silk Road during this period. In addition to goods and ideas, the Islamic Caliphates also played a key role in the transmission of technological innovations along the Silk Road. One of the most important technologies to spread during this time was papermaking. Although paper had been invented in China centuries earlier, it was during the Abbasid period that the technology spread westward to the Islamic world. The Battle of Talas in 751 CE was a turning point, as Chinese papermakers were captured by Abbasid forces and brought to Baghdad, where they helped establish the first paper mills outside of China. The introduction of paper revolutionized the Islamic world, making books and written knowledge more widely available and contributing to the flourishing of science, literature, and scholarship. Another key innovation that spread along the Silk Road during this period was medicine. Islamic scholars and physicians, drawing on knowledge from Greek, Indian, and Persian medical traditions, made significant advancements in the field of medicine. Hospitals were established in major cities along the Silk Road, where physicians practiced and shared their knowledge with others. The exchange of medical texts and practices helped to spread innovations such as surgical techniques, herbal medicines, and public health measures across the regions connected by the Silk Road. The spread of Islam also influenced trade practices along the Silk Road. Islamic law emphasized fair trade and honest dealings, which helped to establish a degree of trust among merchants from different regions and cultures. This shared sense of ethics, combined with the use of Arabic as a common language, facilitated smoother trade interactions and helped build lasting commercial relationships across the Silk Road. By the 11th century, the Islamic world had firmly established itself as a dominant force in Silk Road trade. The cities of the Islamic Golden Age, Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, and Cordoba, were thriving centers of commerce, culture, and knowledge. Muslim merchants, traveling in caravans, continued to play a pivotal role in connecting the distant regions of China, India, Persia, and Europe, ensuring that the Silk Road remained a vital artery of trade and exchange. The spread of Islam and the rise of the Islamic Caliphates transformed the Silk Road, creating a new era of cultural and economic exchange. The Mongol Empire and the Pax Mongolica, 13th to 14th century. The rise of the Mongol Empire in the 13th century had a profound impact on the Silk Road, revitalizing the ancient trade routes and creating an era of unprecedented stability and exchange. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, the Mongols built the largest contiguous empire in history, stretching from China to Eastern Europe. This vast empire ushered in a period known as the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace, which allowed trade, communication, and cultural exchange to flourish across Eurasia. Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes and, through a series of military campaigns, expanded the empire across Central Asia, China, and Persia. By the time of his death in 1227, the Mongol Empire controlled large parts of the Silk Road. Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, later consolidated power in China and established the Yuan dynasty, further integrating the Silk Road into the Mongol Empire. The Mongols' ability to control such a vast territory brought much-needed stability to the region, which had long been plagued by banditry and political fragmentation. The Pax Mongolica provided a secure environment for merchants to travel along the Silk Road. The Mongols actively promoted trade, understanding that it could enrich their empire. To support merchants, they built an extensive network of caravanserais, roadside inns where traders could rest and replenish supplies. They also established relay stations for messages and goods, allowing trade caravans to travel more efficiently. During this period, the Silk Road reached new heights of prosperity. Goods such as Chinese silk, porcelain, spices, precious stones, and tea were transported westward, while gold, silver, glassware, and textiles flowed eastward from the Middle East and Europe. The Mongols themselves were avid patrons of trade, and they encouraged merchants from across the world, Persians, Indians, Arabs, and Europeans, to engage in commerce within their territories. One of the most famous travelers of the Pax Mongolica was Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant who journeyed along the Silk Road to the court of Kublai Khan. His accounts, later published in the Travels of Marco Polo, provided Europeans with a detailed picture of the Mongol Empire and its thriving trade networks. Polo described the wealth and sophistication of Chinese cities such as Hangzhou and Beijing, as well as the bustling markets where goods from all over the world were traded. The Mongol Empire also facilitated cultural exchange on an unprecedented scale. The Mongols were relatively tolerant of different religions and cultures, which allowed for the free movement of Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, and Confucians within their empire. Samarkand, Bukhara, and Karakoram became cosmopolitan centers where ideas, religious practices, and artistic styles from different cultures blended together. The Mongol court itself welcomed scholars, diplomats, and artisans from across Eurasia, fostering a rich environment of cultural exchange. In addition to trade and culture, the Pax Mongolica played a key role in the transmission of technology. Innovations such as gunpowder, paper, the compass, and printing spread from China to the Middle East and Europe via the Silk Road. These technologies would later revolutionize warfare, navigation, and communication in Europe, laying the groundwork for the Renaissance and the Age of Exploration. The Mongols also revolutionized communication by creating an efficient postal system known as the yam, which allowed for the rapid transmission of messages and goods across their vast empire. The exchange of scientific knowledge was another important legacy of the Pax Mongolica. Scholars and physicians from China, the Islamic world, Persia, and India exchanged ideas in fields such as medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and engineering. Chinese herbal medicine and Islamic medical texts were shared across the empire, contributing to advancements in both Eastern and Western medical practices. However, the increased connectivity of the Mongol Empire also had unintended consequences. One of the most devastating was the spread of the Black Death, a deadly plague that originated in Asia and spread to Europe via the trade routes. The plague devastated much of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, killing millions and causing significant social and economic disruption. The same trade routes that had enabled the flow of goods and knowledge also facilitated the rapid transmission of the disease. By the end of the 14th century, the Mongol Empire began to decline due to internal conflicts, rebellions, and the sheer size of the empire, which made it difficult to govern. The empire fractured into smaller, competing khanates, and the era of Pax Mongolica came to an end. Despite the empire's decline, the Silk Road routes that the Mongols had revitalized remained active, and the legacy of the Pax Mongolica continued to influence trade and cultural exchange for centuries. The Mongol Empire's role in rejuvenating the Silk Road cannot be overstated. By uniting much of Eurasia under one political authority, the Mongols created an unprecedented era of peace and stability that allowed for the free flow of goods, ideas, and technologies between East and West. The Pax Mongolica marked one of the most dynamic and prosperous periods in Silk Road history, and its influence can still be seen in the lasting connections between the civilizations it helped to unite. The decline of the Silk Road and the rise of maritime trade, 15th century. By the 15th century, the once thriving Silk Road was in decline, its influence gradually fading as new political, economic, and technological developments reshaped global trade routes. While the Silk Road had long connected East and West, facilitating the exchange of goods, culture, and ideas across continents, several key factors contributed to its decline during this period. The rise of maritime trade routes, shifting political dynamics, and the changing priorities of empires like China and Europe led to the Silk Road's eventual eclipse. One of the primary reasons for the decline of the Silk Road was the increasing prominence of maritime trade routes. By the 15th century, European and Middle Eastern merchants had begun to explore new ways of reaching the wealth of Asia by sea, bypassing the overland routes that had been dominated by the Silk Road for centuries. Advances in shipbuilding and navigation, including the use of the compass and improved maps, allowed European explorers to embark on long voyages across the oceans. The ability to transport goods by sea, which could accommodate larger quantities and travel faster than overland caravans, marked a significant shift in global trade dynamics. The most notable of these maritime explorations was led by Portugal and Spain, two rising European powers with ambitions to establish direct trade links with Asia. In 1498, Vasco da Gama, the Portuguese explorer, successfully sailed around the southern tip of Africa and reached India, establishing a sea route to the rich markets of the East Indies. This breakthrough in maritime navigation marked the beginning of a new era of European dominance in global trade, as European powers sought to establish their own colonies and trading posts in Asia, bypassing the traditional Silk Road routes that had previously relied on Middle Eastern and Central Asian intermediaries. At the same time, the Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644, in China began to shift its focus inward, limiting its participation in international trade. The Ming rulers, particularly after the voyages of Sheng Yi in the early 15th century, gradually withdrew from large-scale overseas trade and diplomacy. While Sheng Yi's expeditions had established impressive maritime trade links with India, Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula, the Ming government decided to focus on internal development and defense, including the restoration and expansion of the Great Wall to protect against northern invasions. This withdrawal from international trade reduced China's engagement with the Silk Road, weakening the once vibrant network of overland exchange. Political instability and the fragmentation of the once powerful empires along the Silk Road also played a key role in its decline. The collapse of the Mongol Empire in the 14th century had already weakened the security and stability that the Pax Mongolica had provided for Silk Road trade. The rise of regional powers, such as the Timurid Empire in Central Asia and the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East, created new political boundaries and rivalries that disrupted overland trade. Frequent conflicts and territorial disputes made it difficult for merchants to travel safely along the Silk Road, leading many traders to seek safer maritime alternatives. The Ottoman Empire, in particular, became a dominant power in the Middle East and played a key role in shaping the decline of the Silk Road. By controlling key parts of the Eastern Mediterranean and Middle Eastern trade routes, the Ottomans could impose heavy taxes on goods passing through their territory, making overland trade less profitable for European merchants. This further incentivized the search for alternative sea routes to Asia, as European traders sought to avoid Ottoman-controlled regions. The rise of Islamic powers in Central Asia also contributed to the decline of the Silk Road. The Timurid Empire, while culturally vibrant, was often engaged in conflicts with neighboring states, and the instability of the region discouraged long-distance trade. The overland routes became increasingly dangerous, with the risk of banditry, raids, and political upheaval making the Silk Road less appealing to traders. In addition to these political and economic shifts, technological advancements in shipbuilding and navigation made maritime trade more efficient and attractive. The development of caravels, ships that could travel long distances and navigate open seas, allowed European explorers to reach distant markets more easily. The Portuguese, in particular, capitalized on these innovations, establishing direct sea routes to India, Southeast Asia, and China. The establishment of trading ports along the coasts of India, Ceylon, and the East Indies allowed Europeans to control the spice trade and other valuable commodities, further undermining the importance of the Silk Road. While the Silk Road never completely disappeared, its importance diminished significantly by the end of the 15th century. The traditional overland routes that had once connected the great civilizations of China, India, Persia, and Europe were gradually replaced by maritime routes controlled by European powers. The age of exploration marked the dawn of a new global trade network in which the oceans became the primary highways of commerce. However, the legacy of the Silk Road endures. For centuries, it had been the most important conduit for the exchange of goods, ideas, religions, and technologies between East and West. The cultural interactions it facilitated helped shape the development of civilizations across Eurasia. Even as maritime trade began to dominate global commerce, the Silk Road's influence could still be seen in the shared cultural heritage of the regions it had once connected. Although the Silk Road gradually fell out of prominence, it remains a symbol of human ambition, exploration, and the desire to connect distant peoples and cultures. The knowledge, technologies, and philosophies that were exchanged along the Silk Road during its height helped shape the world in ways that continue to resonate today. In many ways, the story of the Silk Road is not one of decline, but of transformation, as global trade routes shifted and new connections were forged across the world. The legacy of the Silk Road, influence on modern trade and culture. Although the Silk Road gradually declined as a primary trade route by the end of the 15th century, its influence on global trade, culture, and history continues to resonate to this day. The Silk Road was far more than just a commercial highway for goods. It was a bridge between East and West that facilitated the exchange of ideas, technologies, religions, and cultural practices over more than a millennium. Even after the rise of maritime trade routes, the legacy of the Silk Road endured, shaping the development of modern trade networks, cultural exchanges, and global connections. One of the most enduring aspects of the Silk Road's legacy is its role in the cultural blending that shaped civilizations across Eurasia. The movement of goods along the Silk Road was accompanied by the exchange of art, architecture, religion, and philosophy. As merchants, scholars, and travelers moved along the trade routes, they brought with them not only silk and spices but also new ways of thinking, different religious practices, and artistic traditions that would blend with local cultures to create something new and vibrant. Religions such as Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism, and Manichaeism spread along the Silk Road, leaving a lasting imprint on the regions they reached. For example, Buddhism traveled from India through Central Asia to China, Korea, and Japan, where it became deeply integrated into local cultures. This religious transmission also influenced art and architecture, with Buddhist statues, monasteries, and temples bearing the influence of different cultures along the way. The cultural diversity fostered by the Silk Road also laid the groundwork for multiculturalism in cities along its routes. Cities such as Samarkand, Bokhara, Chang'an, and Constantinople became melting pots where people of different ethnicities, languages, and religions lived, traded, and exchanged ideas. This cross-cultural interaction not only enriched these cities but also set a precedent for the cultural pluralism that we see in modern cosmopolitan cities today. The artistic exchanges facilitated by the Silk Road had a lasting influence on both Eastern and Western art. Chinese ceramics, Persian textiles, Indian sculptures, and Roman glassware all traveled across the Silk Road, influencing the artistic traditions of the regions they reached. For instance, the Gandhara school of art in Central Asia blended Greek, Indian, and Buddhist elements to create a unique artistic style that reflected the diverse influences present along the Silk Road. This cultural fusion would leave an enduring impact on art and architecture in both Asia and Europe. In addition to its cultural legacy, the Silk Road also played a key role in the development of science and technology. The exchange of scientific knowledge between China, the Islamic world, India, and Europe along the Silk Road contributed to advancements in fields such as medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and engineering. Chinese inventions like paper, gunpowder, and the compass spread westward, while Greek and Roman medical knowledge, Islamic astronomy, and Indian mathematics made their way eastward. This exchange of knowledge helped to lay the foundations for many of the scientific advancements of the Renaissance and beyond. Perhaps one of the most significant aspects of the Silk Road's legacy is its impact on the development of global trade networks. The Silk Road set the stage for the rise of global commerce by creating long-distance trade routes that connected distant civilizations. Even after the Silk Road began to decline in the 15th century, the concept of long-distance trade continued to shape the world. The European exploration of maritime routes in the Age of Exploration built upon the commercial principles established by the Silk Road, leading to the creation of new trade networks that connected Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. In the modern world, the spirit of the Silk Road lives on through initiatives such as China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, which seeks to revive and expand the ancient trade routes by building infrastructure, trade partnerships, and cultural exchanges between China and countries in Asia, Europe, and Africa. This ambitious project, launched in the 21st century, aims to create a new era of global connectivity by investing in roads, railways, ports, and communication networks that link distant regions, echoing the legacy of the Silk Road. The Silk Road's impact on modern globalization is also evident in the way it set a historical precedent for cultural exchange and global interconnectedness. The Silk Road demonstrated that trade was not simply an economic activity but a means of bringing people and cultures together. Today, as people around the world are connected through technology, communication, and international trade, the spirit of the Silk Road continues to shape how we view globalization and cross-cultural interaction. Furthermore, the cultural legacy of the Silk Road is celebrated through literature, film, and art, reminding us of the Silk Road's role as a symbol of human exploration and cultural exchange. Stories of famous travelers like Marco Polo, Ibn Battuta, and Xuanzang have captured the imaginations of people for centuries, serving as reminders of the interconnected world that the Silk Road helped create. In conclusion, the legacy of the Silk Road extends far beyond its role as a trade route. It was a conduit for cultural and technological exchange that helped shape the development of civilizations across Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Its influence can still be seen in the art, science, trade, and global interactions of today. The Silk Road serves as a testament to the power of human curiosity, exploration, and the desire to connect with others, and its legacy continues to inspire efforts to build a more interconnected and cooperative world.